Hi everybody. Once I get my 3 images on here, I'm going to show you how I would recommend kind of making it so that you have lots of options to trace. And so this is on a Google document. The first thing I'm going to do is make it so I have lots of room. And I'm going to go ahead and go into page setup. And the default is 1 inch, and I'm going to make that 0.25. So a quarter of an inch. All of these margins just so I have more space for my images. Now that gave me a lot of space. I'm also going to format all the images so that they're wrap text, right? That way I can move them around how I would like them to be. So I've got these 3 images and I can move them around. Remember, you have to leave a little bit of space on the edge because your printer won't be able to print everything immediately to the edge. And so you want to kind of figure out what size they are. And the way that you can do that is you can reformat them, or you can kind of take a look at them just in comparison to the little canvases that you're using. And so what I would recommend is making copies so that if you have an image that you really like, you can have big areas and small areas. And that way, and I'm just using Command C and Command V, what you can do is, maybe I want this, but what would it look like if it were more of a square? And so I can play around with compositions. And if you're coming into school, I can print these out for you, or what you can do is you can print these out at home so that you have a lot of different sizes. Maybe you want to see what this would look like if it were a rectangle. So we have the same image, different compositions, and you can try these in different sizes. Now, while we're working on figuring out compositions, what I've done is I printed out this image and a couple different sizes, and then this one I just squished this, copied it and squished it into a square. Kind of like that square composition. And then I have these other images that I might grab some trees from, a foreground or a middle ground or a background from. And then I have this image that I've kind of manipulated in a couple different ways, this image and the other image that you saw before. You'll need your tracing paper. Tracing paper is kind of like a waxy paper you see through, and you have tracing paper in your packets. You should also, if you need to, you can use wax paper or parchment paper from your kitchen, from baking. And these little tiny canvases, we're going to use different squares and rectangles. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and trace these images, and you need 10 different composition studies. These can be close, but think about using a horizontal image, a vertical image, and a square image. You want different compositions. So first, go ahead and just make 10 of these just by tracing. Once you have your 10 shapes, what you'll do is you'll go ahead and trace. So putting an image underneath, you'll be able to see through with the tracing paper. And maybe what I want to do is kind of move this around a little bit. So if I like this foreground right here, and I want to have this idea of this plant right in here, I can go ahead and trace that plant. I can put kind of little indicators of the flowers in there if I want. These are very basic. Remember, we're going to create very simplified compositions. So I'm just tracing over. And then maybe what I'd like to do is put these mountains in right here, coastline in there. And perhaps I'm just going to leave this blank, but then maybe move this hill on over here. And then I have one composition. And if I need to, I can go ahead and extend lines that weren't there before. The other thing I can do is kind of play around with them. So if I have this image and I want to make this more of a seascape, grab my horizon line right there, and maybe I want to add or change this a little bit. And then add an interesting foreground kind of over here. Manipulate in that manner. Right? So these are just simple compositions. You always want to make sure you have a foreground, a middle ground, and a background. Make sure that you establish those things. The sky does not count as background. Now, if you have a really dark background, in class, and maybe you have at home, a light box, they can come in really handy if you have a darker image that you might want to use. And so with this, if I turn the light box off, it's kind of hard to see everything, but if I turn the light box on, I can see things. You can also use a window to do this. And so what I can do is if I want to add this, kind of trace that. You can move things around a little bit if you want. Remember, these are very basic. Just figuring out where you want things actually on your page. And the mountains get lost a little bit. So what I might want to do is actually flip this and have the mountains go the opposite direction or come up higher. You can do that. And so you need 10, go ahead and turn this off. You need 10 composition studies. Now, with the composition studies, what you're going to do is figure out just where you want things to be. Once you finish your composition studies, that's when you're going to do your color studies.